It was a typical Tuesday afternoon in downtown Atlanta, warm, a little humid and noisy, with the usual mix of foot traffic, street musicians, and sidewalk chatter. Inside Joe's Coffee and Books, a cozy cafe tucked between a yoga studio and a used bookstore, the lunch rush was just winding down. The bell above the door chimed. A tall black man in his early 30s walked in. He wore navy blue scrubs and sneakers that looked worn but clean. His name was Marcus. To most people, he looked like any other hard-working guy grabbing a coffee on his break. But not everyone saw him that way. Seated near the window was a woman in her early 40s with a toddler in a booster seat beside her. The child was giggling, smearing cookie crumbs across the table. The woman, Jennifer, glanced up when Marcus stepped in. Her eyes flicked to her purse, sitting on the seat beside her. As Marcus approached the counter, Jennifer subtly picked up her purse and placed it on her lap. It was a small movement, practiced, automatic. Her eyes didn't meet his. Her jaw was tight. Marcus saw it. He'd seen it before. He said nothing. Instead, he smiled politely at the barista, ordered a cold brew, and waited quietly at the end of the counter. His shoulders were relaxed, but inside, he felt the familiar sting, not rage, just that heavy, tired ache that comes from knowing you're being judged for something you can't change. Jennifer glanced out the window, pretending not to notice the awkwardness. Then it happened. A sound cut through the air, sharp, sudden, wrong. The toddler, her son, began to cough. At first it sounded like a typical kid cough, but then it turned into gasps, strained wheezes, the kind that grip a parent's heart. Jennifer's eyes widened in panic. "Oh my God, Henry!" The boy's face turned red, then purple. His tiny hands clawed at his throat. The cafe froze. "Somebody help!" Jennifer shrieked. "He's choking." She looked around wildly. The barista froze. A couple dropped their phones. No one moved fast enough, except Marcus. In 2 long strides, he was at the boy's side. "Ma'am, I'm a nurse," he said firmly. "He's choking. Let me help." Jennifer hesitated just for a second. That second nearly cost her everything. But she moved. Marcus gently but swiftly lifted the child from the booster seat, turned him over, and gave him 5 firm back blows with the heel of his hand, each one measured precise. Nothing. He switched to abdominal thrusts. 1, 2, 3. Then a sharp gasp. A chunk of half-chewed cookie shot out of the boy's mouth and hit the floor with a wet smack. Henry coughed, then cried. The sound was the most beautiful thing Jennifer had ever heard. She dropped to her knees, holding her son, as tears poured down her face. "Oh my God. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you." Marcus crouched down beside them, checking the boy's pulse, watching his breathing. "He's okay now," Marcus said softly. "Scary, but he's okay." Jennifer looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time. Her voice broke. I judged you." Marcus met her eyes. There was no anger in his, just honesty. "I know," he said, "but your son's life mattered more than that." The cafe was still. The barista began to cry. The couple in the corner stood and clapped softly. Jennifer held her son tightly as Marcus stood, wiped his hands, and turned to walk back to the counter, where his cold brew was waiting untouched. The aftermath was quiet, stunned, raw, and reverent. Marcus took a deep breath as he returned to the counter, every eye in the cafe following him. The barista placed his coffee down, her hands shaking slightly. "On the house," she whispered. He gave a small nod, but didn't smile. His thoughts were still with the child, still feeling the thump of the back blows, still hearing that terrible silence before the cry came. Behind him, Jennifer stood shakily with her son in her arms, her face pale but grateful. She hesitated before approaching Marcus, like she wasn't sure she deserved to walk into his space now. But she stepped forward. "I don't even know your name," she said. "Marcus," he replied. "I'm Jennifer, and I owe you everything." He shook his head gently. You owe your son a cookie with less drama." She laughed, choked by tears. "I mean it. I made a judgment about who you were, and I don't even know why. I'm so ashamed." Marcus sipped his coffee and looked at her with a calm steadiness. "Most people don't think they're doing it. It's a reflex. It's not always hate. Sometimes it's just habit." She swallowed hard. "I don't want it to be mine anymore." He studied her for a moment. "Then teach your son better. That's how it stops." Jennifer looked down at Henry, who was playing with the hem of her shirt, now oblivious to how close he'd come to disaster. The silence in the cafe broke into murmurs again, people returning to their tables, casting glances toward Marcus with new respect, some with guilt. Marcus wasn't looking for any of it. He wasn't interested in being a hero or a headline. He had another 6 hours of work ahead of him. He had a night shift at the hospital tomorrow. His life didn't pause just because someone else realized something. But as he turned to leave, someone followed him. It was a man in a business suit, mid-40s, with glasses and a phone in hand. "Excuse me," the man said. "I saw what happened. That was incredible." "You said you're a nurse." "Yep," Marcus replied. "My name's David. I work with a health nonprofit, Access First. We've been looking for local professionals to help with community outreach. People trust people they see in real life, not just brochures. Would you be interested?" Marcus paused. "I already work 2 jobs. Of course, I'm not asking you to volunteer full-time," David said quickly. "Just maybe speak at a school, a community center. We could pay a small stipend." Marcus didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. He looked back toward the cafe window. Jennifer was sitting now holding her son close. The purse she'd clutched so tightly earlier sat forgotten on the floor. "Send me your info," Marcus said. "I'll think about it." Outside, the sun was bright. The city moved on, unaware that inside one small cafe something had shifted. A stranger had saved a life. A woman had dropped a prejudice. And maybe, just maybe, a seed of change had been planted. Marcus checked his watch. He still had time before heading to the clinic. He decided to take a walk, let the city breathe around him, let the adrenaline burn off. As he strolled past a newsstand, a woman called out to him from behind the counter. "Hi, you're the guy from Joe's, right?" Marcus stopped, surprised. "Already?" She grinned, holding up her phone. Someone posted it. "Local nurse saves choking child while being profiled." Got shared over 1,000 times already. Marcus sighed. He wasn't ready to be a headline. By that evening, the video from the cafe had spread far beyond Atlanta. It wasn't just local news anymore. The short clip, just under 30 seconds, captured everything: Jennifer's panic, the toddler choking Marcus calmly stepping in, and the moment of relief when the boy cried out. The caption beneath it read, "He saved her son. She moved her purse when he walked in." The contrast was sharp, painful, honest. Social media exploded with comments. "We need to talk about this kind of prejudice. That man is a hero. Period." This is the reality for Black professionals every single day. Marcus tried to ignore it. He had no desire to go viral. He wasn't interested in 15 minutes of fame, not when there were patients to check on and bills to pay. But his phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, coworkers, even distant cousins were tagging him, sending messages, calling. He let most of them go to voicemail. The next morning, as he walked into the hospital for his shift, a few nurses clapped softly when he entered the break room. "Really?" he said, with a raised eyebrow. One of them grinned. "You're famous now, Nurse Marcus. Saving babies and breaking stereotypes." "I was just doing my job," he muttered. "Yeah," another nurse said, "but you did more than that. You made people look in the mirror." He didn't respond. Meanwhile, Jennifer was having her own reckoning. She sat at her kitchen table, Henry playing with blocks in the living room, while emails and texts poured in. Some friends supported her honesty in the aftermath. Others questioned why she hadn't already known better. She'd written a long post, the night before an open apology. I made an assumption. I saw a kind, calm, educated man and clutched my purse. Then that man saved my child's life. And in that moment, I saw how wrong I had been. I will carry that lesson forever. It went viral too, but she didn't care about the attention. She cared about what came next. She started reading, listening, asking questions she should have asked years ago. And she made a promise to herself: Henry would grow up different, better. A boy who judged people by their kindness, not their skin color. Later that week, Jennifer reached out to Marcus through the cafe owner. She asked if he would meet her, not for a public statement or a photo op, but for a real conversation. Marcus agreed. They met again at Joe's, this time sitting at the same table. No cameras, no crowd, just two people who had lived through an uncomfortable truth and decided not to run from it. I can't stop thinking about that moment, Jennifer said. Not just the choking, but the second before that, when I looked at you and assumed the worst. Marcus stirred his coffee. It's not the first time. Probably won't be the last, but it should be the last, she said. He looked up at her thoughtful. Change doesn't happen because people feel guilty. It happens when they feel responsible. Jennifer nodded slowly. Then, I want to be responsible. For what I teach my son. For the space I take up. For what I see and what I've ignored. For the first time since the incident, Marcus smiled. It wasn't forgiveness. It was respect. Because accountability means more than apology. The following week, Marcus found himself in unfamiliar territory, standing in front of a packed auditorium at a local community center. Folding chairs lined the room, cameras stood in the back, and a banner above the stage read, "Everyday Heroes, Conversations That Change Us." He hadn't asked to be here. In fact, he almost turned the invitation down. But something about Jennifer's change, real, unfiltered, and uncomfortable, pushed him to say yes. He adjusted the mic, took a breath, and began. I'm a nurse. That's what I do. I help people. I don't ask what they believe, or who they voted for, or whether they think I'm a threat when I walk into the room. I just help. The room was still. But the other day, I was reminded that sometimes helping people isn't just about saving a life. Sometimes it's about forcing them to see their own. He recounted the moment in the cafe, the choking, the look on Jennifer's face, when panic overcame judgment. He didn't paint himself as a savior. He spoke plainly, truthfully, about what it's like to walk through the world wearing skin that others fear for no reason. I'm not here to shame anyone, he said. I'm here to ask you, all of you, to notice what's been invisible. The quiet thoughts you think are harmless. The bags you move without thinking. The conversations you avoid. They all build something. And you don't see it until it breaks. After his talk, a line of people waited to shake his hand. Among them were teachers, pastors, social workers, and parents holding their children a little closer. One young woman with tears in her eyes said, I never realized I was doing it until your story. And behind her, Jennifer stood with Henry on her hip. She smiled, nervous but grateful. We started reading a new book at bedtime, she said. It's about a kid who becomes friends with someone different than him. And you know what Henry said? Marcus raised an eyebrow. What? He said, like the nice man with the coffee. They both laughed. As the event ended, Marcus walked out into the evening air and stood for a moment under the streetlights. The city buzzed around him, unaware that something small and massive had happened inside that room. A few days later, a high school teacher messaged him through the nonprofit David worked for. She asked if Marcus would come speak to her seniors, not to lecture them, but to show them what grace under pressure looks like. He agreed. From there, things moved quickly. More invitations followed. Podcasts, panels, even a national morning show. But Marcus kept his boundaries. He wasn't an influencer. He was still a nurse, still a man who had bills, family responsibilities, still just Marcus. But his story traveled far beyond what he imagined. It wasn't just a feel-good moment anymore. It was a mirror, and the world, some of it at least, was finally brave enough to look into it. Months had passed since the day at the cafe. The video had come and gone from the news cycle. Other stories rose, other headlines took over. But for the people at the heart of it, Marcus, Jennifer, and even little Henry life had changed in ways that wouldn't fade. With the trending hashtags, Marcus still worked his hospital shifts, still walked to Joe's Coffee and Books a few times a week. But now people greeted him with more than just polite nods. They asked questions, they listened, and more than once, strangers told him, "I saw your story. Thank you for how you handled it." He always replied the same way anyone would have helped that child. But deep down, he knew not everyone would have. And maybe that's why it mattered. One quiet Saturday morning, as Marcus sat reading a novel by the window at the cafe, the bell above the door chimed. He looked up and saw Jennifer and Henry. They waved. He smiled. She approached his table. "We're headed to the Children's Museum," she said. "But Henry insisted we stop in here first. Said he wanted to give you something." The boy held out a crumpled drawing. It showed a stick figure with a stethoscope and big arms, standing next to a smaller one holding a cookie. Across the top, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "My hero Marcus." Marcus took the paper gently, heart catching in his chest. "Thank you, Henry," he said. "I'm honored." Henry beamed. Jennifer lingered a moment longer. "I never told you this," she said softly. "But I used to think racism was something loud and obvious. That because I wasn't hateful, I was innocent. But that day, that moment, it cracked something open. And I'm still learning how to fix it." Marcus nodded. "Awareness is the first step, and it's the hardest one." She reached into her purse, not to move it, not to shield it, but to pull out a book. "We're donating copies of this to Henry's preschool. Stories about kindness, empathy. I figured if we can plant better seeds now, maybe one day there won't be any purses that need moving." Marcus took the book and smiled. They said their goodbyes, and the cafe returned to its usual rhythm. But as Marcus sipped his coffee and looked out the window, he realized something had changed, not just in Jennifer, but in him too. Because for all the frustration, the injustice, and the quiet wounds he'd carried for years, he now had a story that had created real visible change. Not because of who he was, but because of how he chose to respond. With calm, with courage, with compassion. And as the city moved around him, Marcus sat in the corner of that small cafe, not as a symbol, not as a headline, but simply as a man who turned a moment of prejudice into a lifetime of perspective. And that made all the difference.